Thank you. I'm so excited to be talking to you guys about a tool that I use that I'm actually kind of a geek about. So hopefully by the end of our time here today, you'll kind of start to understand at least a little bit about why I love this tool so much. So I'm not sure how many of you have used Affinity Maps. You can give me a thumbs up if there's reactions or anything in the chat, but I'm just going to assume that you don't know that much about it because we'll start from scratch. Just a little bit about me, just to get started. Again, my name is Cindy Brummer. I am the CEO and creative director of Standard Beagle. We are a UX design and development agency based here in Austin. And I spend a lot of my time working with my clients and my team and using all kinds of different tools in which to get, clients in line and my team's ideas on the table and just a lot of time on Zoom, which is that little illustration there. In the center of the picture there, that's my co-founder and business partner and partner in life, Andy, who's helped basically my big support and has, been along for this ride. And a little bit about the side things that I do. I just recently got my master's degree in UX design from MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art, where I really get to refine a lot of the tools that I use every day. I teach one of the UX boot camp programs at the University of Texas. I was really excited to be invited to do portfolio reviews. So I saw Mark in the audience, and I'm going to be on May 27th giving a portfolio review for the Product Hire Job Club. And then also on Friday coming up, I'm going to be part of a pitch event through the Johns Hopkins Technology Innovation Center. So I'm part of a fellowship program called Hexite, and my team is going to be pitching a product that we've been working on for the past 17 weeks, and I'm really excited about that. And it's open to the public, so if you'd like me to share that link, I'm happy to do that. Wanted to make sure to give a shout out to the sponsors today who have made ProductCamp Austin possible, and really it's great that there's so much support and interest around these topics that are going on today. So the things I'm going to cover today, I'm going to kind of go back to the beginning about affinity maps. I'm going to explain what they are, why I think they're so awesome, and when you might want to use them. But then I also want to go into the kind of the tactics around it, like how you would actually create an affinity map once you and the tools that kind of go into it. And then I want to call out a couple of like special cases. One, there's a very key piece that you need to know about, and that is the moderator piece and why moderation is a really important part and what things to think about as you're either moderating it yourself or choosing a moderator for an affinity mapping session. And then also you can do affinity mapping both in person and online remotely, but there are some things to think about when you're doing it remotely. And I want to make sure that I call out those considerations for you so that you can be thinking about it. As I mentioned before, I am a super big geek about affinity maps. I love them. I use them for all kinds of things. And it's really because I get an aha moment when I'm able to kind of look at everything from a bird's eye view and start looking and creating these patterns. I've literally had the ta-da, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. And I wouldn't have been able to do it had I not used a tool to like step back and look at everything all together, and it's almost like looking at it with new eyes. And so that's why I'm really passionate about this particular tool. An affinity map, in essence, is a way to cluster groups of information. So it could be information that you've gathered externally from stakeholders and user interviews, analytics, surveys, all kinds of things. It's a way to bring it together through facilitated exercise and then begin to cluster common ideas together so that you can start to see patterns. It helps you make sense of a whole lot of different things. Um, because all this data can come from different places. And so it really can help you start to see patterns in a way that maybe you wouldn't have looked at before or thought of before, just from memory or looking at things independently, like say in a document or a transcript. The other thing I like to use affinity maps for is for creating ideas. It's a fantastic tool for getting a team together, whether they're your peers or your, stakeholders in a project, and getting the information out of their heads so that you can start to see alignment between people. Now, this affinity mapping tool has been around pretty much something similar to it since the 1960s. It was created as part of the Six Sigma model. So it's just one of those tools in it. And fortunately, because it's so effective, it's been used by a lot of other people, and it's just golden in my opinion. So the things that are part of creating an affinity map really come down to these things here. The first one is you have to understand what the purpose of the exercise is going to be. What are you trying to figure out? What is your objective for using it? So it could be I need to make sense of the interviews that I've created, or I need to get ideas out of the team members here. I need to hear what everybody has to say. So you need to make sure that there's some sort of purpose around it. You also need to make sure that somebody's leading it. This is not necessarily going to be an exercise that you just want to be a free for all. It's really best to have some sort of moderator or facilitator that can lead the session and keep everybody kind of on track. Otherwise, the whole thing could divulge into like all sorts of different tangents. And then it's not a useful activity at all. And it could be yourself, or maybe you're choosing someone that can help, bring everybody together and keep everybody on track. You also want to make sure that you figured out where you're going to do it. The space for like creating this affinity map needs to be somewhere prepared. So it could be maybe you have a conference room where you can get everybody together with a whiteboard, hopefully in a vaccinated world. But you can also do this digitally. So you just need to be prepared. Like, where am I going to do this activity? And then finally, you need to make sure that you have the content. What is it that you're going to be working with? Is it transcripts? Is it survey data? Is it just getting ideas out of people's heads, or getting people aligned and around an activity? So make sure that you understand what the content is going to be, and then have that ready. You don't want to be trying to do that in the middle of the activity. So here's an example of an affinity map, and this one looks like it was created for user research purposes, so the synthesis around the research. You can see a variety of data is pulled together. All the different sticky notes with like the white labels look like printouts of like quotes and comments from people. And then they've grouped it in various places, so you can kind of see how they've like thought like, okay, these sort of go together. And then they've also put labels on it, which are kind of hard to make out. I couldn't find a larger picture where you could kind of see like all of the detail around it, but you can kind of get a feel for what the end result of an affinity map is from this. So this is kind of where we're going. Now, the big question is like, what benefit does this mean? Like, why do we really need an affinity map? Like, what purpose does it solve? Well, one, it's really simple. I mean, it's just getting people together with sticky notes and Sharpies. Or if you have a tool like Miro or Mural, it's simple to get everybody together to create this. It's also more, it's better to involve everybody. So imagine, if you will, if you sit in a conference room and you're having like a meeting and there's one voice that dominates everything else, and then a whole bunch of people that don't say anything. And then they leave the meeting, and the people that didn't say anything, they weren't heard. Well, there's a way around that, and that's with an affinity map. Getting everybody to put their ideas on sticky notes and put them up on the board lets every team member be involved. It's also creative and analytical. which helps with both sides of the brain and for people that kind of come from different mindsets. So I once did an affinity mapping session with an organization. They needed to kind of find alignment around the direction of their intranet and what they wanted to focus on and how they were going to do it. So we had folks from all across the organization, HR, payroll, IT, um, patient services, all of these people came together. Some people were kind of more on the creative side, some people more on the analytical side, but everybody got a voice in the activity and it was really helpful and everybody appreciated it. It also makes your work visible. So if you're in an organization where people want to see that you're actually working, what better way than to set up in your office a giant affinity diagram where people can see the work that you're doing. You can even get feedback on it. So it's a great way to show people that what you're working on and the value that you're bringing. And then it also promotes critical thinking because you're not just creating patterns, you're looking at those patterns, you're looking at the groupings, and you're thinking critically about what it is you're seeing. So if you're seeing something, you might go, oh, that's why they're doing it. So it makes you question some of the assumptions that you had just by looking at the natural groupings of the information. I particularly like it for the grouping, the pattern discovery. It lets me like look at things in a different way, because if I have, particularly on the user research side, I've got a bunch of interviews and I'm only reading them independently, I might forget some of the things that I heard. So by taking all of that and putting it out in front of me and grouping information around, I can begin to see what like trends are. So maybe that one piece of information that I heard from a user, maybe nobody else felt that, but it stuck with me. So maybe if I hadn't done the activity, I'd be thinking that that was a big deal. But now that I can see patterns, I can see, well, maybe that was an edge case and I don't need it. So I give you an example of how the patterns really helped me in a project. I was doing a project around grocery store shopping and how people, after COVID hit, how they were handling shifting their behavior to online grocery shopping. And what was really fascinating, and they didn't say this out loud, but what was fascinating I could see is that they were struggling around the way that the online grocery store interface was. And as I started to look at the information and dig deep into it, I realized that the people that were struggling had also told me that the way that they shop is like the way that they shop in the store. They had a mental model of a grocery store in their head, and they were actually shopping online the same way because they were like envisioning it. And so the way that they were going around and looking at items online was frustrating them because it wasn't matching that mental model enough. And so that was a really big aha moment for me that I would not have seen without doing that affinity mapping exercise. And the other thing is that it's just inexpensive to do. I don't have to purchase an AI tool to help me see the insights because honestly, the human brain is so good at recognizing patterns. It is incredibly powerful. And I don't have to pay extra for that. So I like to use this most of the time instead of relying on a computer to help me for everything. So there's lots of different ways that, in different situations that you might use this tool. Some of it's for user research, but some of it's just for getting ideas out. And let me walk you through each of those scenarios. So stakeholder alignment is one of my favorite ways to get everybody on the same page. If you've got stakeholders that have given you a vague, like, we need to do this, that's a great way to kind of get everybody together to figure out what this means. Um, One way you can do this is get everybody in the room and have everybody take the sticky notes and maybe ask them the question like, what do you think, what is your vision? What's the most important thing that we need to accomplish? Get everybody to write it down. And then when you have them actually walk through the activity, they start to see, okay, other people are thinking this. I didn't think about that. So what it does is it helps get a lot of the stakeholders together with those strong opinions to see what other folks are saying. And then you're not trying to be the person that's the referee. They're doing it themselves in that activity. It helps a lot to make sure that all those stakeholders feel heard too. So this is actually an image from a project that I worked on where the stakeholders did this activity. This is a couple of years ago before COVID. And it made a huge difference because there's some very opinionated folks in the stakeholder group. And just by doing this activity, the rest of the project went much more smoothly because everybody felt like they had been heard. We were able to take their suggestions and implement it in the project. And I didn't have any kind of pushback later on. Another way you can do it is through customer discovery. Just by focusing on those interviews that you're doing with customers to find out what they need, what to build, those kinds of things can help you see patterns as well. This is from a project that I worked on for the fellowship that I'm working on. And we talked to a whole bunch of surgical residents. We talked with their trainers. We talked with hospital workers and credentialing boards. And we took all of that data and put it in one place to kind of see what it is they need. We weren't sure what to build. We needed to figure out what they were looking for so we could find some idea of the product that and what it needed to be. And so that was really helpful for uncovering, especially at that early product development stage. User research is a big place. UX researchers use this all the time. This is where we bring together all kinds of data from different places, surveys and user interviews and just observations that you're seeing, and you can cluster it together. The image here is of 16 interviews that I completed. And on the left was 8 from one user type, and the other is 8 from a different user type. And I was able to group the information and then compare it to see where is there overlap between the two user types, so I could know what their view is and really get into their shoes. And then finally, what I'm going to cover today is that team brainstorm. I've started using this a lot. I have team members like myself that are very outspoken, not afraid to give their opinion. And then I have some team members that aren't afraid, but they need some time to think. They need some time to consider. And the affinity diagram is kind of the equalizer. By creating this map of the ideas, we can have everybody contribute to it in a way that feels safe, and it pulls ideas out of just, sometimes out of midair. And then by seeing what other people are putting down, you can actually build on it. It becomes kind of a snowball where everybody's kind of, oh, what about this? Ooh, what about this? And it kind of becomes fun. Plus, you can draw fun little diagrams. You can see that my team drew a piece of pizza because they really thought that that was important in what we were brainstorming. Okay, so now that we talked about the why and the when you can use this, let's talk about how you would actually create an affinity diagram. Now remember what we said, purpose is really important. So you want to make sure that you understand what you're trying to accomplish with the affinity map. It's one of those things that if you don't know, then it's not going to be worth your time. And then next thing you want to do is gather together the tools that you're going to use and the time. So time is really important. You want to make sure that you give this activity enough time. How much time is really kind of that it depends answer. I know that I've done team brainstorms and I've been like, oh, an hour is enough time. It's not. I can tell you that. You really want to make sure that people have enough time to get their ideas out and not rush through it. So you might need a block of 2 hours, 4 hours, it depends. Make sure that you're not trying to rush the process. You might have to do it over multiple days. You also want to make sure that you have a space to lay out everything. It could be a whiteboard, a wall, a big table, or maybe you use an online tool like Mural or Miro, or I know there's a bunch of stuff out there now. If you're going to do it in person, you make sure you have enough sticky notes, and I like Sharpies. Those sticky notes can be the same color or different colors. It's really up to you and how you want to do it. Sometimes I'll use different sticky color notes for people or for interviews or however I'm doing it. It's really up to you. The reason I like Sharpies is because if I'm standing across the room, I can see the words much better than a ballpoint pen. So that's really important. And then finally, you might also bring together, get some dot stickers. You can get them from Office Depot. And this allows people to vote on the idea that they think is most important. You can also use little circles, or there's a dot voting mechanism in Mural, which is really cool. So that's one of the reasons why I use Mural all the time. But those are really helpful so you can get alignment if you're going to vote on like what idea you're going to go with. Now that you've got all your tools, now that you've blocked out time, this is when you want to kind of get prepared for it. You want to assemble the people that are going to be there. Does it need to be everybody? It may not. So you want to make sure that the right people are there. Being diverse is really helpful. So you can get ideas from different parts of the company, different backgrounds, different perspectives. So it really helps to have a diverse team. In terms of how many people, usually it's somewhere between like 4 and 8. It kind of depends also. I've done it with larger teams as well. It can get a little unwieldy, but you know, you just have to make it work for you. You also want to make sure that you choose a facilitator that is going to help lead everybody through. It's really critical that you find the right person for this, and we'll talk about what makes a good moderator in just a little bit. You also want to determine, you know, what kind of use case you're doing it for. You might have a purpose. So just kind of hammering in that fact of like, make sure you have a purpose. Then you want to make sure you prep your data. So you don't want to show up with like stacks of paper, or having like not having gotten all the transcripts put into a place or anything like that. Make sure that you're ready with everything that you're going to put on those sticky notes. You might want to highlight interesting points as well. Or you might want to prep your team to make sure that they understand what you're going to be asking of them, like giving them some sort of email with expectations about what the activity actually is. And then go ahead and, you know, tap into that place where you're going to do the activity. Is it going to be online with Zoom, or is it going to be in a physical space? Now, once you've got everybody together, you got them all assembled in the place where you need it to be, and you've set the expectations of what's going to happen, this is when you kind of, you know, everything kind of hits. This is where the meat of it comes. You're going to get sticky notes, and you're going to put one idea per sticky note. So you might want to do this in batches. Maybe you start with one question and you have everybody write out like the answer to that question first. Or maybe you have everybody start on different interviews and they're taking out what they think is important from an interview. It really just depends. You don't want this to necessarily stretch on forever. Remember that people have so much attention, they can't really like take too long like focusing on one thing. So keeping it short, time box it, maybe in 5-minute increments or 10-minute increments, and then get everybody talking again. I like to do this silently. It helps a lot. Once you've got all the ideas up in the place where you can see it, then you kind of stop everybody, then you start grouping. Don't start grouping before you have all the information out there. Make sure that you do the grouping after you've finished getting all the ideas out or getting all of the interview data out. You're going to start looking for patterns at this point. And once you've gotten the groups where you want them to be, that's when you start making circles around them and saying, okay, this group is together, this group is together, and label them. This is about the part where I like look at it and I have to take some time to consider it. And there might be some insights that I'm pulling out of it. Like maybe the whole team has decided that we're not doing enough as a group and I need to have a team building activity every quarter as a result of what I'm seeing. Or maybe we need to do a lunch and learn. Maybe all the stakeholders are telling me that, you know, maybe the original goal of the project is not what they actually meant. Maybe I misinterpreted it. So this is the part where you really have to get in there and think critically about the groups that you've created, and don't be afraid to move them around if you see that you've missed something. And then once you've created those groups, capture it. Take a picture of it. Um, you know, maybe, you know, snap it. Like if you're a mural, you can download it, and something where you can get it to everybody and you can have it tangibly in your possession as a deliverable. I know that we're getting close on time, so let me run through this remote considerations really quick. So make sure you, when you're online, that moderation is something that you pay attention to. Being online is so different than being in person. And you have to make sure that you keep everybody kind of on track, and make sure that people are not being distracted by other things. The phone, the email, like you can't take that stuff away when they walk, in the online environment like you could in person. So make sure that you keep everybody's attention. You also want to make sure that you're letting people know how to use the tools. So if you've chosen an online tool, I've done it. I've been in a situation where people were completely lost how to use Mural. So do a little bit of training, a little bit of prep work to get people on the same page, because you don't want to, get people in there and they're like, I don't know how to do this. Make sure that you don't waste time in your affinity mapping session. You also want to make sure that you set the expectations very clearly throughout. Now we're going to put the ideas in the sticky notes. Now we're going to group and you're going to take this much time. It's really important that you emphasize what your expectations are up front, before you start the next step in the activity. And then always come prepared. You might have some questions that you want the team to answer before they get into the facilitation session. So make sure you give them that prep work ahead of time. Some of the things you might need to adjust is how you prepare the data. You might need to put it in a digital spreadsheet if you have it tangibly. You might need to make sure that you block enough time and do it a little bit differently for Zoom. There's no way people are going to pay attention for more than an hour at a time. You might need to start the session by, reminding everyone to put their phones away. And then you also want to make sure you're providing time for breaks. So lots of things to adjust as you're going through. I can honestly say that by using affinity mapping, it's helped me. I had to practice it over time. But the more I practice it and the more I work with others while I do it, the more I'm understanding about like the things that I'm working on. And it's a really fantastic tool. And so now I'm ready to answer your questions. I realize I didn't go over the moderator thing because my slide didn't come up, but if you have any questions about moderation, I'm happy to answer them right now. You guys can come off mute if you want.
Cindy, I'll read out one question that came over the blue channel. It says,
Sure.
good stuff, like the aspects of everyone has a voice and getting everyone on the same page, but what tips do you have on eliminating groupthink, and what tips do you have on eliminating confirmation bias?
That's where the silent work really comes in. It helps a lot. So if you put a question in front of the group and then ask people to put their ideas, one idea per sticky note, maybe you have them spread out enough so they can't look at what other people are doing. And then you have them put those sticky notes up on the whiteboard. That helps a lot with removing the groupthink, just by having them do it silently. I know that we worked on a working team agreement, and my team came up with all kinds of different ideas, which I could have very much influenced by having everybody talk over each other, and then people would have been afraid to contribute. So that silent work is what helps overcome confirmation bias and the groupthink.
We have 1 minute left, so if you've got a question to ask, come off mute and give Cindy your best.
This is Mike. This is really outstanding. I think one of the things I've struggled with these kinds of exercises is you have this enormous creative input in a short period of time, and then transferring it into the real work and managing it long term is difficult. How do you guys manage this in a long term kind of way?
Oh, that's a really good question. In terms of, well, I don't have a huge team. So when I'm doing like team alignment type things, um, the way that we always kind of point back to, this is what we decided in that session. That helps. In terms of stakeholders, I often have to remind them. So what I'll do is I'll take that affinity diagram and I'll put it into a report, and I'll kind of explain like how we did it. This was, there were the objectives. This is some of the data that came out of it, and this is what you all decided. And then when they see it written in front of them with the images, that helps a lot for managing that long term. And even in a user research project, it's good to have that up front and center, like in a deck. If you're presenting to clients, if you're presenting to the team, they can see the work that went into it.
Thank you.